Father God, we just thank you so much for this evening that we get to join together in fellowship as we open up your word together. And it was just such a blessed time and a blessed thing to get to do this. And so we just ask, God, that you would pour out your spirit on us this evening, that we would leave with a better understanding than we came with, even if that understanding is sometimes confusing. And, we just love you, and we want to draw closer to you as we enter into your word. And it's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Like normal, I want to start with video tonight. We're actually going to watch two, but they're pretty short, and so I don't think it's going to slow us down too much. Last week we had a somewhat controversial discussion about God and gods and Yahweh and all of those things going on here in Genesis, and we're going to re-enter into that discussion tonight as we get into more interesting things in Genesis. So these videos will hopefully set us on the right path in understanding a little bit more Hebrew spiritual mindset and kind of help us to get out of our own way and let Moses guide the conversation in that way. So let's get those videos.
When most people think about the story of the Bible, they think of a story about God and humans. However, we learned that there's a whole other cast of characters that appears throughout the Bible and plays a really important role. Right. Spiritual beings, angels, demons, and the like. Right. And in the Bible, they inhabit the heavenly realm, which is parallel to our earthly reality, and actually overlaps with it. Now, all these spiritual beings have their own unique characteristics. Now, here's what's fascinating. The biblical authors have one word that can refer to all the
Okay. Are you confused? Because that is very different than how we think about the spiritual beings in our normal church setting, right? We talk about God, and we talk about angels, we talk about demons, we talk about Satan and the devil, and then we read Revelation, we talk about the dragon and the great serpent of old, and it's none of that really gets to what it seems like Moses understood that we don't understand. And I'm not standing before you as someone who does understand and wants to impart that understanding. I'm standing before you as someone who is enjoying not understanding along with you. Cool? So just as we go forward, keep in mind that obviously the whole Bible points to Jesus, right? And then take that idea and put it in that box, and we know that and we agree on that. But Moses doesn't know who Jesus of Nazareth is. He knows that there's a coming Messiah, and he's going to express things that way. And so we don't want to get away from Jesus. That would be a terrible way to express it. We want to set aside what we know is going to happen in the future so that we can read the Bible fresh from the front to the back. You with me? Let's get started. We are in Genesis. I almost said Jeremiah. Genesis 29, starting off tonight. Have you all read this? 29 through 36? You're all good. If I don't address something, you're going to be like, stop, we got to talk about this thing. Okay. We left off last week with Isaac sending Jacob back to Haran, to the family of Laban, to go get a wife. That's where the story left off. So Jacob goes on his journey, and he comes to the people of the east. As he looked, he saw a well. Okay, well, what biblical theme did we just hit in verse 1? East-west, okay. So just from that first line and what we know about our biblical theme, is the story going to go well, or is the story going to go poorly? There you go. So the biblical authors have, I hope you're seeing, they have a way of communicating to us with more than just their words and more than just what their words actually say, but with because of the repetitions of those words, we get a deeper understanding, and that's what biblical themes are all about. So as he looked, he saw a well in the field and 3 flocks of sheep, and for out of that well the flocks were watered. The stone on the well's mouth was large, and when all the flocks were gathered, the shepherds would roll the stone away and put the stone back over the face of the well. And so Jacob says to these shepherds, "Where do you come from?" And they said, "We're from Haran." And he said, "Do you know Laban? He's my uncle," basically, is what's going on here. And they say, "We know him." And he said to them, "Is it well with him?" And they said, "It is well. And Rachel, his daughter, is coming with the sheep." And he said, "Behold, it is still high day. It's not time for livestock to be gathered together. Water the sheep and go pasture them." But they said, "We cannot until all the flocks are gathered together and the stones rolled away from the well." And while they were still speaking, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she was a shepherdess. And as soon as Jacob saw Rachel and the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother, Jacob came near and rolled the stone from the well of the mouth and watered the flock of Laban, his mother's brother. And Jacob kissed Rachel and wept aloud. So that's quite an introduction, right? They haven't spoken one word to each other, and he kisses her and then cries. So, I don't even know what to say about that. It's just so weird to me that, how is she going along with this guy right now? I'd be like, "Look, weirdo, go away," right? But she sticks around, and Jacob told Rachel that he was her father's kinsman and that he was Rebekah's son, and she ran and told her father. So this is a mirroring story, right? Where have we seen this before? Going back to Genesis 24. Abraham sends his servant, Isaac sends his son. When Abraham sends his servant, what I want to do is I want to point out some differences in these two stories. So when Abraham's servant is at the well, what's the first thing he does? He prays. And when Jacob is at the well, what's he do? He sees a pretty girl and kisses her. So if we want to go back to something that we've talked about a little bit before, is Jacob walking by faith or walking by sight? Totally walking by sight, right? He is just completely diving into what he sees and wants, and that's what he's going after. So the question came up last week of why did Abraham send a servant and Isaac sent Jacob? And I think the reason, even though there's not ever one reason given, the reason is given in the form of a story of how well it went with Abraham's servant and how poorly it's going to go when Jacob goes there. And then if we go back to Genesis chapter 24, one of the things that Abraham talks about with sending his servant is he references the Abrahamic covenant. And he says, because God promised to give us this land, why would I send my family out of this land? Why would I, that's the idea, is we're not going to leave the land that God gave us. It's like he learned from when he left and went to Egypt, right? In Genesis chapter 12. He's sort of picking up on the mistakes that he's made, and we saw that a little bit last week as well, and he's learning from it. Isaac does not seem to have that same understanding, and so Jacob goes, and the result is just not going to be very good. One other thing that I want to go back, because this is a little bit of a detail, and I think we just passed over it. In Genesis chapter 24 from last week, Laban and Bethuel answered and said, and they're talking to Abraham's servant, they answered and said, the thing has come from Yahweh. We cannot speak to you good or bad. Behold, Rebekah is before you. Take her and go. Let her be the wife of your master's son, as Yahweh has spoken. And I want to kind of do a little bit of compare and contrast here in chapter 29 as we keep going. As soon as Laban heard the news about Jacob, his sister's son, he ran to meet him and embraced him and kissed him. A lot of kissing in this family. Brought him to his house. Jacob told Laban all these things, and Laban said to him, surely you are my bone and my flesh. I almost messed that up. I almost went too far to where we've seen that before. But where have we seen that before? This is what Adam says to Eve, right? You are my bone and my flesh. And he stays with him a month. So just immediately, between this and what we just read in chapter 24, what's the difference? In chapter 24, Laban said, the thing is from the Lord. Take Rebekah and go. And Jacob seems to not really get to the point, first off. He's not like, I came here for your daughter. He's like, I'm your relative. And he ends up staying for a month. And then he ends up serving him. And here's why I say that. In the next verse, Laban says, because you're my kinsman, should you serve me for nothing? Tell me what your wages should be. And it's as if Jacob is there without having ever told Laban his purpose for being there. Like, he's just showed up and started serving him one day. And Laban's like, a month later, he's like, what do you actually want? What are you trying to get out of me for this work that you're doing? And so he says, I want to marry your younger daughter Rachel, because Leah's eyes were weak. This is something that just doesn't translate into another language. This is a Hebrew way of saying that Leah, however you want to say it, was really ugly. She was not a good-looking gal. But Rachel was beautiful in form and appearance. And Jacob loved Rachel, and he said, I'll serve you 7 years for Rachel. As we continue on this evening, we're going to come to Genesis chapter 34, which is, because you've read it, the story of Dinah being defiled by Shechem, who was the prince of the town of Shechem. And he says in that passage that he loves her. And we read that passage, and we know that he doesn't mean that it's like a good, like consensual type of love, right? You with me? Did you catch that as you were reading chapter 34, or are you just like, I'm totally wrong? We're all good there? It seems to me, and I'm gonna make this claim, that Jacob saying that he loves Rachel is very similar to Shechem saying that he loves Dinah. It seems to me that what he sees is a pretty girl, and he's just going to go after her whatever it takes. He's going to work for 7 years, which is a completely unreasonable request for Laban to put on him. But if you notice, Laban doesn't put that request on him. Jacob says, I will serve you for 7 years for your younger daughter. It's better that, and Laban said, it's better that I give you to her than that I should give her to any other man. Stay with me. So Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed to be but a few days because of just how much he loved her. And man, I don't know. It doesn't seem to me that this is like love. It seems to me that he just saw this pretty girl at a well and is just really infatuated with getting with her. Great point. Ooh, great point. So what you're saying is that the will of the woman is not taken into account. Really good point. Absolutely, I completely agree with that. So Jacob works 7 years. He goes to Laban. He says, give me my wife that I may go into her, for my time is completed. And Laban gathered together all the people. He makes a feast. And then at the end of the feast, presumably, it doesn't say this, but Jacob must have been like super hammered because he doesn't recognize, right, which woman he's sleeping with that night. Like, huh? The lights were off. Yeah. I mean, but still, you'd think he'd know after 7 years. In the morning, behold, it was Leah. Like, oh my gosh, what a shocker. And Jacob said to Laban, what have you done to me? Did I not serve you for Rachel? You've deceived me. Okay, well, that's rich coming from Jacob, right? Okay. And see, this is what I love. As we get further and further into the text, I can just like make a comment and you guys are like, yeah, that's so good. Yeah, okay, totally. Just walking by sight, right? Just going after the desires of the flesh. Okay, and Laban said, it's not done so in our country. We don't give the younger before the firstborn, so complete. Okay, and this is something that's lost in English. The word for week is the same as 7, okay? Or very, very similar. So if we just kind of retranslate a little bit, if you'll allow me that leniency. Verse 27, complete the 7 of this one, and I'll give you the other in return for serving me another 7 years. And Jacob did so and completed her 7, and Laban gave him his daughter Rachel to be his wife, and Laban also gave his female servant Bilhah to his daughter Rachel. And I skipped over it, but we read it above that along with Leah came her servant Zilpah. So Jacob has 2 wives who are sisters, and also the 2 servants of those 2 wives. So Jacob goes into Rachel, and he loves Rachel more than Leah, and served Laban another 7 years. This week's, by the way, I loved the discussion that took place on the email chain this week. I thought it was so great. Thank you, everyone who participated in that. This week, and you don't have to participate. By no means is that a requirement, but my goodness, if you want to, it was so encouraging for me to get to go through and read all of that. This week's thought of the week, if you will, is going to be on polygamy. So I'm excited to chat about that with you over email. It's going to be super fun to read your perspectives on that. So let me just say this. At this point in the story, does Jacob seem like a good guy or a bad guy? So he's a dumb guy. Oh boy, is he. What are we looking for from Genesis 3:15? The seed. Here we are, and Abraham's grandson. Like the line is continuing from Noah to Shem we go down the line, and we arrive at Jacob. We're looking for the seed, and he's got 2 wives and 2 of his servants' wives, and he's going to have kids with all 4 of them. What are we supposed to do with this guy? We'll talk about polygamy over the course of the week. I don't want to just like give it all away now and you guys just tell me what I want to hear. I want to hear your thoughts on. So anyways, so Jacob has kids. When the Lord saw that Leah was hated, actually, I want to kind of write down as we go. Is there someone who has a really good reading voice who would want to read this really loud for us? And it won't be on the screen, so you have to have your Bible open because I'm going to be writing. Anyone? Go ahead, Carrie. Yeah. You got to read it loud for everyone to hear, though.
Where are we?
Verse 31.
Okay. Do you want my weird translation, or should I get a different translation?
Just something that is readable, as long as we understand it. Don't read it in Hebrew, is what I'm saying. Verse 31. Sorry, chapter 29, verse 31.
It's just 31?
Like 31 and then keep going.
Okay.
And read kind of fast.
Okay. And the Lord saw that Leah was despised, and he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. And Leah conceived and bore a son, and called his name Reuben, for she said, Yes, the Lord has seen my suffering, for now my husband will love me. And she conceived again and bore a son, and she said, Yes, the Lord has heard that I was despised, and he has given me this one too. And she called his name Simeon. And she conceived again and bore a son, and she said, This time my husband will join me, for I have borne him 3 sons. Therefore his name is called Levi. And she conceived again and bore a son, and she said, This time I sing praise to the Lord. Therefore she called his name Judah, and she ceased bearing children.
Keep going.
And Rachel saw that she had borne no children to Jacob, and Rachel was jealous of her sister, and she said to Jacob, Give me sons, for if you don't, I'm a dead woman. And Jacob was incensed with Rachel, and he said, Am I instead of God, who has denied you fruit of the womb? And she said, Here is my slave girl Bilhah. Come to bed with her, that she may give birth on my knees, so that I too shall be built up through her. And she gave him Bilhah, her slave girl, as a wife, and Jacob came to bed with her. And Bilhah conceived and bore Jacob a son. And Rachel said, God granted my cause. Yes, he heard my voice, and he gave me a son. Therefore she called his name Dan. And Bilhah, Rachel's slave girl, conceived again and bore a second son to Jacob. And Rachel said, In fearsome grapplings I have grappled with my sister, and yes, I won out. And she called his name Naphtali. And Leah saw that she had ceased bearing children, and she took Zilpah, her slave girl, and gave her to Jacob as a wife. And Zilpah, Leah's slave girl, bore Jacob a son. And Leah said, Good luck has come, and she called his name Gad. And Zilpah, Leah's slave girl, bore a second son to Jacob. And Leah said, What good fortune, for the girls had acclaimed me fortunate. And she called his name Asher.
Keep going.
And Reuben went out during the wheat harvest and found mandrakes in the field.
Okay, yeah, sorry, pause there. What verse are you in now?
14.
14. Okay, y'all have read this before. I need to save some time, right? There is a trade of food for marriage rights. Where have we seen this before? It's Jacob and Esau. Give me some of your stew or I'm going to die, right? Okay. So she trades mandrakes for Rachel getting to sleep with Jacob. Jacob must have been like the hottest dude. Okay. And so God listened to Leah. She conceived and bore a 5th son, which is who? Who's the 5th son? Issachar. I'm going to spell this wrong. Did I get it? Okay. I got it. Okay. And Leah conceived again and bore Jacob a 6th son, and his name was Zebulun. I'm running out of room here, Leah. Oh, I messed up the numbers. Oh, no. Oh, no. That's 9 and 10. Okay. Okay. And then finally, God remembered Rachel, and God listened to her and opened her womb, and she conceived and bore a son and said, God has taken away my reproach. And she called his name Joseph, saying, May the Lord add to me another son. So Rachel over here gets number 11, and his name is Joseph. And then also included in there was Dinah, who is from Leah. Dinah, who's the daughter, not counted among the sons, but was mentioned in verse 21. Okay. So is Jacob a good dude or bad dude? I don't think so. I think it's a busy dude. I don't know about happy. All right. As soon as Rachel had born Joseph, Jacob said to Laban, "Send me away that I may go to my own country. Give me my wives and my children for whom I have served you, that I may go, since you know the service I've given you." And Laban said, "If I have found favor in your sight, I have learned by divination that Yahweh has blessed me because of you." Boy, that's a weird sentence. That is something that is going to be condemned later on in the law. And it's just kind of one of those things that makes me go like, is the condemnation of it later on because of something that's happening earlier? Have you heard the expression that laws are written in red? Like you don't have a warning on Pop-Tarts to take them out of the package before you put them in the toaster, unless some idiot didn't take them out of the package before he put them in the toaster, right? And so that idea kind of also translates to the Bible of like, maybe that divination is condemned for Israel because of some idiot, here we are with Laban, doing this thing that is right now we don't really know much about, but we're going to get some clues as to what the Bible means when it talks about divination later on in the biblical story. But nonetheless, through divination, he finds out that Yahweh blessed him because of Jacob. And he says, "Name your wages, and I'll give it." And Jacob said to him, "You know how I've served you, how your livestock have fared with me. You had little before I came, and you've increased abundantly." Now, where have we seen that before? Okay, I'm thinking all the way back to Abraham in Genesis 12. Leaves his country, goes to a foreign land, and gets rich off the foreign land, right? Does it again later on. Isaac does it when he lies about Rebekah being his wife. He gets rich off the foreign land. Now Jacob is getting rich off of Laban. It's not Egypt like it was with Abraham and Isaac. No, it was Abimelech with Isaac. It's not Egypt like it was with Abraham and Abimelech with Abraham and Isaac. Now it's Laban with Jacob, but the same sort of pattern is taking place. Now I'm going to skip down because you read this. We're in 30. Okay. So, the reeds and the sticks with the flock. What's going on? Okay. So Laban's like, "You can take all of the spotted and striped animals because those were the ones that were, in his mind, lesser." And Jacob is like, "Okay, God's going to bless me anyways, so I'll agree to this deal." And then what he does is he peels sticks to expose, where does it say this? Where does it say he exposes the white of the sticks? Is that 38? 37? There it is. Exposing the white of the sticks. This word white right here. Oh no, that's so small. What is it? The word white is Laban. So there is, as far as I know, there is no scientific explanation for what's happening here. We're going to get to the next chapter, and there is going to be a God explanation for it, but there is some spiritual significance to these words on the paper. You remember our theme list? And the man and his wife were naked and not ashamed, and then they got the covering, and they weren't exposed. God gave them the covering of skin, and we were dealing with that shame, nakedness, and covering. What's going on here? What does it say right here? If instead of white, we read the Hebrew word, it says that he was exposing Laban. Are you with me? Okay. There is, again, that does not explain scientifically why these sheep were being born with stripes because they were mating in front of sticks that had the bark taken off. But we do see in the Hebrew that Jacob is exposing or uncovering Laban. As we continue in the story, it's going to be like a cunning off. That didn't make sense. Let me say that a different way. It's going to be like a competition between Laban and Jacob to see who is more cunning and more crafty and more sneaky. Okay? And who was the craftiest of all the animals in the garden? The serpent. It's like a race between Jacob and Laban to see who can be the most serpent-like. throughout this story. Okay. So Jacob, we find out in the next chapter, he has a dream. And God tells him that the animals that mate in front of the sticks are going to be the ones who are born with these, so-called defects and be part of Jacob's flock instead of Laban's flock. And it says, where does it say it? Right down here. Sorry, I thought I had the verse written down, and I don't. This dream. It's somewhere here at the beginning. Your fathers cheated me of my wages. God did not permit him to harm me. He said, the spotted shall be your wages. And God has taken away the livestock of your father and given them to me. In the breeding season, here it is, I lifted up my eyes and saw in a dream that the goats that mated with the flock were striped, spotted, and mottled. And the angel of the Lord came to me and said, Jacob. And I said, here I am. Okay, sorry. The angel of God, I misread that, said to me in a dream, Jacob. And I said, here I am. And he said, lift up your eyes and see. All the goats that mate with the flock are striped and spotted and mottled, for I have seen all that Laban is doing to you. I am the God of the house of God, where you anointed a pillar and made a vow to me. Now arise, go out from this land and return to the land of your kindred. So the angel of God shows up and tells Jacob, I'm going to basically give you the flock of Laban because of how you've been mistreated by Laban while you were in his land, and now go back home. Okay. And Leah and Rachel answered, basically agreeing with him. We have nothing left here. Everything that was our father's now belongs to you. So Jacob arose and he set out. He drove all his livestock, the property that he had gained, and his possessions. I want to stay here. The livestock, his possession, he acquired in the land of Canaan to his father Isaac. Verse 19. Laban had gone to shear his sheep, and Rachel stole her father's household gods. Jacob tricked Laban, the Aramean, by not telling him that he intended to flee. He fled with all that he had, and arose and crossed the Euphrates, and he set his face toward the hill country of Gilead. When it was told Laban on the third day that Jacob had fled, he took his kinsman with him and pursued him for 7 days. Did you see those two numbers? The third day and the seventh day. When those two numbers appear together, where are we supposed to go back to? Genesis 1. We're supposed to go back to Genesis 1. By the occurrence of those two numbers being right next to each other, it is an indication for us that we are about to see a creation story. Are you with me? Okay. What's going to happen in like 2 or 3 chapters? God's going to change Jacob's name to Israel. He's going to create a new nation. And 3 and 7 are setting us up for a new creation story. Okay? So Laban goes out, he finds him, and God, let me see here. And Elohim came to Laban in a dream and said to him, be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad. When Laban caught Jacob, he said, what have you done? You tricked me, you stole my daughters with a sword, and you didn't tell me. I would have sent you away with mirth and songs and tambourine and lyre. Lyre is exactly correct. And why did you not permit me to kiss my sons and daughters farewell? Now you've done foolishly. It's in my power to do you harm, but the God of your father spoke to me last night saying, be careful not to do anything to Jacob, good or bad. And now you've gone away because you longed greatly for your father's house. But why did you steal my gods? Like, you took everything from me. You took my daughters. You took my flocks. I can't touch you because your God showed up to me. This is so funny. The God of your father showed up to me and said, don't touch you. Why did you steal my gods? Okay. And Jacob answered Laban, I was afraid that you would take your daughters from me by force. Seems reasonable. Anyone with whom you find your gods shall not live. And of course, you read the story. Rachel was sitting on them, but she said, I'm on my period. I'm not getting off the camel. And so he didn't find them. If you didn't catch that little detail, that's what she means when she says the way of women is with me. Okay, I want to jump down here. So, good. Laban said, so they're setting up a pillar, and they're going to make a covenant, the two of them, Laban and Jacob. And Laban said, this heap, so they make it like a heap of stones, this heap is a witness between you and me today. Therefore it's called Galeed and Mizpah. For he said, Yahweh watch between you and me, when we are out of one another's sight. If you oppress my daughters, or if you take wives beside my daughters, although no one is with us, see, God is witness between you and me." And Laban said to Jacob, "See this heap and pillar which I have set between you and me as a heap and witness." And he basically says the same thing. "I won't pass over this to you, and you don't pass over it to me. The God of Abraham, the God of Nahor." That's an interesting one that we haven't seen before. Abraham and Nahor were brothers, and Jacob comes from Abraham, and Laban is going to come from Nahor, I think, if we trace the family trees. And so he's calling back the common family link between the two of them. So the God of Abraham and the God of Nahor. And it kind of makes me wonder, is he talking about the same God? Or is he talking about two gods? Is the God of Abraham Yahweh and the God of Nahor is another God? I don't know, but he just says that. The God of their father judged between us. So Jacob swore by the fear of his father Isaac, and Jacob offered a sacrifice in the hill country and called his kinsmen to eat bread. And they ate bread and spent the night in the hill country. In the early morning, Laban arose and kissed his grandchildren and his daughters and blessed them, and Laban departed and returned home. Busy day. When Abraham rescued Lot from the kings led by Chedorlaomer, and with him was the king of Babylon, and he comes back from battle, he meets two people. Do you remember who he meets? The king of Sodom and the king of Salem. We call the king of Salem Melchizedek. What does he do with the king of Salem? Yeah. He does give a tithe, but he eats bread and wine, which is exactly what Jacob just did with Laban. Okay? Now, if this connection is going to work, we need to see him meet another person. Well, thank you, Bible translators, for giving us a title. That's about to happen. And Jacob went on his way, and here's an interesting one. The angels of God met him. And when Jacob saw them, he said, "This is God's camp." So he called the name of that place Mahanaim. And Jacob sent messengers before him to Esau. Okay, so we just totally missed something because this is translated in English. This word for angels of God is the word mala'ache. This word for the messengers that Jacob sent is the word mala'achim. It's the same word. So where did Jacob get the idea to send messengers ahead of him to go meet Esau? It seems like God sent messengers to go meet Jacob, and then Jacob's like, now there's an idea. I'm going to send messengers to go meet Esau. Because we have this ingrained way of thinking about angels, it's just one of those things where I kind of want to, release my grip a little bit on how I bring my ingrained thinking into Scripture, and remember that angels is just another word for messengers. So God sends messengers to Jacob, and then Jacob sends messengers to Esau, who was living in the land of Seir, in the country of Edom. And he instructed his messengers to tell Esau that he's not coming to fight, he's coming in peace. And the messengers come back, and he says, "Your brother has 400 men with him." And Jacob, naturally, he's super scared because that's a big army. Like, if Esau is mad at Jacob for stealing his birthright and then running away to another land to get a wife, then he should be scared of these 400 men. And so he stays there that night, and he had with him, he took a present for his brother Esau, 200 female goats. So his plan is to appease his brother. He's got all these cattle and everything. He's going to give them to his brother as a gift, and it's going to be sort of an appeasement. He hands them over to his servants, and his servants pass on ahead of him and put space between them, and he instructed the first, "When Esau, my brother, meets you and asks, 'To whom do you belong and where are you going?' say, 'They belong to your servant Jacob. They are a present to my lord Esau, and moreover, he is behind us.' And he instructed the second and the third, so that by the time Jacob gets to Esau, Esau has had 3 very large presents of cattle. So if anything's going to appease him, it should be this. And so Esau, the thinking, I think, as far as I can tell, is that when Jacob gets to Esau, Esau's not going to kill Jacob because he'll be really happy with the presents. For he thought, I may appease him with the present that goes ahead of me, and afterward I shall see his face. Now, Okay. The same night, he arose and took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, and his 11 children. And he crossed the ford of Jabbok. He took them and sent them across the stream and everything else that he had. And Jacob was left alone. And who shows up in his camp? Some dude. A man shows up in his camp. Okay. We have a mental image of what it looks like when Jacob wrestles with God, right? And it's usually something like this. There's one with wings who's glowing. I could scroll through all of these because they're all going to look the same. One of them's glowing or dressed in white. There's an abstract one. That's pretty cool. That is Jacob wrestling with God, right? It looks like our common way of thinking about an angel, and he's there and he's wrestling with Jacob. But what is, remember that this line right here is not put there by the original manuscript. It's added by the translators, right? So who is Jacob wrestling with, according to the text? A man. So he shows up in his camp. So this is not some mystical thing. This is like a home invasion. So Jacob is like in his camp for the night, and a guy shows up and he starts wrestling with him. So don't think about, some mystical angel with wings. This is a home invasion, and Jacob is trying to protect himself from the guy who is randomly in his camp. When the man saw that he did not prevail against Jacob, he touched his hip socket. This word touch is not like he touched it and did a miracle and his hip came out of place. It means to touch violently, to strike, to reach, to afflict. So this is not some peaceful thing. This is a UFC fight. And Jacob just got his hip ripped out of joint, okay? And his hip was put out of joint as he wrestled with him. Then he said, "Let me go, for the day has broken." So they're there all night. The sun comes up, and Jacob says, and the man says, "Let me go." But Jacob said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." So that's weird. Guy shows up in his camp. He wrestles with him all night, and he says, "I'm not going to let you go unless you bless me." I don't know why he says that. And here's what he said to him. He says, "What is your name?" And he said, "Jacob." And he said, "Your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with men and have prevailed." What's he talking about here? For you have striven with God and with men and have prevailed. Is he talking about that wrestling match that night? Throughout his life, like his whole history. And I used to, before someone told me to read the Bible more carefully, I used to just hit this line and go, of course, he's wrestling with God, and the guy says, "You've striven with God, so this must be God." I don't think that's what he's talking about. I think this is like an overview of Jacob's life. And the meaning of Israel is, oops, that's not what I wanted. Get out of here. Israel. Okay. Shirah means to strive, and El means God. So the name Israel, that is going to be the name borne by the nation for centuries to come, means the people who have wrestled with God, or the ones who are wrestling with God, or are striving with God. It seems to me, well, let's keep going. And Jacob asked him, "Please tell me your name." I just told you my name. You tell me your name. But he said, "Why is it that you ask my name?" And there he blessed him. We don't know what that blessing looked like. It's just, that is all it says. So, He doesn't. We'll see in the last line, he doesn't. Yeah, he walks with a limp the rest of his life. So Jacob called the name of the place Peniel. Paneh is the Hebrew word for face. The Spirit of God hovered over the face of the waters. That's the word Paneh. So Paneh, and El, of course, means God. Peniel, for I have seen God face to face, yet my life has been delivered. So what in this passage up to this point makes Jacob think that he's seen God face to face? It's just right here. Like a man shows up in his camp, he wrestles with him, he breaks his leg, and then he's like, I've seen God face to face, and yet my life has been delivered. And so we started this class with those videos to kind of remind us that what we think when we use the colloquial use of God today is not the same as the colloquial use of God in Hebrew in the Old Testament. Are you with me? We say God and we think Yahweh, and that's okay because we all are on the same page, we understand what we're talking about. But when Moses says God, he might not mean that. He might not mean Yahweh the way that we do. He might mean spiritual beings. In Psalm 8, you have made him for a little while lower than the spiritual beings. And Hebrews will take Psalm 8, verse 5, and translate that spiritual beings as angels, but in Hebrew, the word is Elohim. It's God. It's not Malachim. It's not angels. It's Elohim for God. And so, for I have seen Elohim face to face, yet my life has been delivered. The sun rose upon him as he passed Penuel, limping because of his hip. Therefore, to this day, the people of Israel do not eat the sinew of the thigh that is on the hip socket, because he touched the socket of Jacob's hip on the sinew of the thigh. Okay, so he meets Laban, then he meets Esau. And those two people, one, they eat bread together, and one, he sends a whole bunch of stuff to in order to appease him. Okay, so you remember Abraham with the king of Sodom and the king of Salem. One, he gives a whole bunch of stuff to the king of Sodom in order to appease him. Let it not be said that I was made rich off of you, and so he gave him everything except the wages for his men who went to battle with him. And then the king of Salem, Melchizedek, he eats the bread with. We have the same pattern right here. Now, it's going to happen again with this man who maybe is God, showing up and wrestling all night, and he says, I've seen your face and lived, I've seen God's face and lived, and then there's going to be a phrase in this next chapter that's going to call back to that, so I want you to keep that phrase fresh in your mind.
So do we think, and I know we're going to call back to it, but do we think that the man is God? Do we, honest, think that the man is God because of the renaming? Because up until now, the renaming has come from God?
That's an excellent question. Allow me to answer that by simply pointing out that he has to be renamed again, so somehow it doesn't stick.
Yeah.
Right? I don't know. That doesn't answer your question, but it's just a thought.
Well, I had another question as to why he had to do it again. So
Okay. So let's just keep going then. Cool.
So, I didn't look this up, but I have a hint. I have a New King James Version. And in verse 24, man is capitalized. And then the rest of the verses, every time it's referencing the man, it's capital. It says he,
Yeah,
it's capital He.
that's very interesting.
So to me, I mean, when I read this
Mm-hmm.
translation, my mind instantly goes to that.
Yeah. So those translators made a choice that these ones didn't make, which was to interpret the man as God, which is not, we shouldn't disregard it, but it needs to be put in balance with the fact that not all translators agree, because the ESV translators aren't capitalizing that. Well, the NKJV, you said NKJV, are capitalizing that. And so there's certainly something deistic going on with this man, right? And I don't want to make any claim at this point more than that. Yeah.
You made a comment earlier which kind of struck home with me, and that is that what's going on here. I sort of believe that Jesus is involved.
Jesus is, so you're saying this is a Christophany?
Yeah.
Okay.
But we look at it through the lens of
Looking back.
the Ten Commandments.
Mm-hmm.
Jacob didn't have to.
Right.
Polygamy wasn't wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Deception of Esau, fighting with Laban, having all these babies with all these women. I mean, none of this was.
Against the law.
It wasn't against the law.
Okay.
God hadn't revealed that to mankind yet.
Good point. I have some thoughts on that, and I don't know where to start, and I don't really have time to start anywhere I want, so. But it's a great, yeah, I love that. Great point.
The ESV doesn't capitalize hymns and whatever's for God anyway.
That's right, yeah, ESV doesn't capitalize pronouns. Mm-hmm.
They get to God's people.
Yeah, exactly. They do. The ESV translators didn't want to have this conversation with us, so they just didn't capitalize pronouns at all so that they wouldn't be called up later. So that's weird. Can we press on and see if we get any answers for it as we keep going? Okay. Jacob lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, Esau was coming, and 400 men with him, and he divided the children among Leah and Rachel and the 2 female servants, and he put the servants and their children in front, and Leah with her children, and Rachel and Joseph last of all, and he went on before them, bowing himself on the ground 7 times. And Esau ran to meet him and fell on his neck and kissed him. This is not a where have we seen it before, but where are we going to see that again? Fell on his neck and kissed him. The prodigal son parable. Yeah, totally. And it's just an expression of fulfilled longing and love, to fall on his neck, to weep, to kiss him. Esau lifted up his eyes and saw the women and children. He said, "Who are these?" And Jacob said, "The children whom God has graciously given to your servant." And all of them come, and they introduce themselves to Esau. And Esau says, "Let us journey on the way. I'll go ahead of you." But Jacob said to him, "You know that the children are frail." He calls him Adonai. "You know that the children are frail, and that the nursing flocks and herds are a care to me. If they're driven hard for one day, all the flocks will die. Go on ahead of me, my lord, and I will go slowly at a different pace until I come to you in Seir." And Esau says, "Let me leave you with some of my people so that they can meet any of the needs that you have." And Esau goes on his way to Seir, and Jacob, who said, "I'm going to follow you to Seir," instead goes to Succoth. And from Succoth, he sets up a tent and some booths, and then he goes to Shechem, and he lives in Shechem. So he never made it to Seir like he told Esau he was going to do. So even when Esau gives him a warm welcome back, he's still almost like he's afraid that Esau's going to kill him, and he's like, "Yeah, I'll meet you there," and then goes somewhere else. Okay. Where there was something I wanted to read in here. "I have seen your face," this is Jacob speaking to Esau, "which is like seeing the face of God, and you have accepted me." Isn't that an interesting phrase after that whole last chapter where he says, "I've seen the face of God and lived," and here he's going to Esau and he's like, "Looking at your face is like looking at the face of God." I don't know what to do with that, but it's there.
It seems like he's just like he speaks very symbolically, talking about God and interactions with other people, other beings.
Yep.
It seems like he's making comparisons of character.
Okay.
I guess is the way I'm looking at it. It's a super underdeveloped thought, but
Sure. Oh, it's more developed than any of mine. It's great. Yeah. I mean, there's something that connects that phrase to the last chapter, right? And I'm just like, Moses is just smarter than me. That's where I come to on this one. So is that guy, to your question, is that dude who committed a home invasion, is that God or is that a man or what is that? Who is that? So why do we think it is?
Yeah, like this entire time we're just like, okay, cool, somebody time.
Well, that's why we think it is. But why do they think it is? This is... Yeah, just Google it. This is referenced somewhere, and I didn't write it down. Does anyone know the reference? Where it talks about Jacob wrestling with, I want to say it's an angel. Hold on. We're just going to do this. Jacob wrestle. Nope. That's because I misspelled it. Okay. That's not it. Man, it's like Proverbs or something. I tell you what, I'm going to re-look that up and get back to you in tomorrow's email, I think. It's not that, is it? No, it's not that. Okay. This is referenced, okay, I'm trying to answer that question. This is referenced somewhere else in the Bible, and it talks about Jacob wrestling with God or an angel or something, and I don't remember. I'm going to have to look it up again. It's Hosea? You're the man. What verse?
12, 3 through 5.
In the womb he took his brother by the heel, and in his manhood he strove with God. He strove with the angel and prevailed. He wept and sought his favor. He met God at Bethel, and there God spoke with us. The Lord, the God of hosts, the Lord is his memorial name. Yeah.
I mean, Hosea thought it was an angel.
Hosea seems to think it was an angel. And wouldn't that make sense? Because in chapter 18 and 19 of Genesis, Yahweh shows up and he's three men, and then in the next chapter, two of those men are angels. So if man and angel are a lot more closely linked in the Hebrew mind than they are in our mind, then maybe it can say man in Genesis and Hosea can take an angelic understanding.
Angels often seem to look like men.
Yeah, they always show up like men. Not always, but yeah.
Not like a man, act like a man.
Certainly, Jacob didn't see a dude glowing with wings on his back. But Hosea maybe has I don't know, closer to that understanding. Which footnote? That's connecting it to Genesis 28:12. So that's Jacob's ladder vision. And then here in Hebrew, oh, interesting. In Hebrew, verse 4 does not say God, it says him. I know you can't see that because it's probably tiny up there. But yeah, in Hebrew, God is excluded and it says him. So even Hosea is confused. And maybe God is then, again, a choice by the translators, right? Sorry, hold on. Two people talking. Go ahead, and then I'm going to come to Mark. Uh-huh. But the translators chose to say God. Yeah, totally. Yeah, sorry.
I gotta believe that Jacob actually had an encounter
With Jesus. Okay.
I mean, he said it twice within a couple of verses here. Even when he saw his brother Esau, he says, I have seen your face as though I have seen the face of God.
Mm-hmm.
It's still in his expression.
It's fresh in his mind, certainly. I agree with that. Yeah. The thing is, like, I can't say no, because maybe. Just like, it's certainly a spiritual being, and pre-incarnate Christ, pre-incarnate Jesus, is certainly a spiritual being, right? It's like the fourth man in the fiery furnace. It's like, people will say that's a Christophany, and I'm like, well, there's nothing in the text that says it has to be Jesus, but I also can't say with certainty it's not. You know, so it's kind of that same thing. Yeah, great point. Time is against us. Go ahead. Absolutely. Yeah. Yep. Absolutely, we can. So that means they can look like people, right? Yeah, totally. Okay, want to talk about... Go ahead, Tom. You're right. It's a category title, yeah. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Right. Yeah, and Hebrews 1 quotes Psalms and goes into a really long, not long, but like a deep exposition of angels being higher than man, and then the Son of Man being made lower than the angels, which is quoting from Psalm 8. And in Hebrew, it doesn't say angels, it says Elohim. But yeah, all of that is just sort of all puzzle pieces that fit. Yeah, it's as far as I've gotten with it, too. All right, so Dinah. Dinah, who is Leah's daughter that she bore to Jacob, they were living at the land of Shechem, and she goes out and wants to see what the women of Shechem are doing and what they do with their time. And during that time, as she went out to go see the women of the land, the prince of the land saw her and seized her and lay with her and humiliated her. So that sounds like love, right? Okay. Glad we're together on that one. And his soul was drawn to Dinah, the daughter of Jacob. He loved. the young woman and spoke tenderly to her. So Shechem spoke to his father Hamor, saying, "Get me this girl for my wife." Cool. Not cool. Not cool. So Jacob heard that his daughter had been defiled, and his sons were with his livestock in the field, and Jacob held his peace until they came home. Then he told his sons about it. And so this is going to get really interesting. Ask me, verse 12, ask me for as great a bride price and gift as you will, and I will give whatever you say to me. Only give me the young woman to be my wife. It sounds to me like he's saying, I'll work 7 years for this young woman, right? Okay. And the sons of Jacob answered Shechem and Hamor deceitfully. So now where Jacob and Laban were like battling to see who could be more like the serpent, now his sons are getting in on the action. We're going to lie to this guy. And not only are they going to lie to him, it's absolutely crazy. Only on this condition, verse 15, will we agree with you that you will become as we are, by every male among you being circumcised. What is circumcision? Think covenants. Think covenants. It's the sign of, which one? Do you remember? The Abrahamic covenant. Yeah. Genesis chapter 17. If anyone wants to participate in the covenant, they have to be uncovered. Let me just leave it at that. They have to be uncovered before God. They can't have the covering of flesh. It has to be taken away. And what is happening here is there is, by the process of circumcision, there is a promise of joining the nation and entering into the covenant. Because remember that circumcision, it wasn't just for Israel, it was for Abraham, it was for his sons, and it was for foreigners who also wanted to join the nation. And so by bringing up circumcision, what they're saying is, you can join us in this Abrahamic covenant, and they're using the promise of joining the covenant. Well, you've read the story, I'll just give it away. They're using the promise of joining the Abrahamic covenant for murder. Mind-blowing. Absolutely mind-blowing stuff. Sorry, thought someone said something. I wanted to pause for you. But it was so quiet. I don't want to make you speak if you don't want to. On the third day, when they were all sore, two of the sons of Jacob, Simeon and Levi, took their swords and came against the city, and while it felt secure, they killed all the males. They killed Hamor and his son Shechem with the sword, and took Dinah out of Shechem's house and went away. And the sons of Jacob came upon the slain and plundered the city because they had defiled their sister. They took the flocks and their herds and their donkeys and whatever was in the city and the field and all their wealth and all their little ones and their wives, all that was in the houses, they captured and plundered. So are Simeon and Levi good guys or bad guys? So these are the tribes of Israel. These are like, we think we have this mental image, or maybe it's just me, maybe y'all are better at understanding the Bible. I have this mental image of like, these are the guys in the Bible who are like the ones that are the example setters and like what the church comes out of. And then I actually go and I read the Bible, and that is not the case, right? These are not dudes to be idolized. Levi. That is the perfect question. We'll answer it in Exodus 32. She said, why did the priest descend from Levi? In case you didn't hear, we'll answer that when we get to Exodus. It's exactly the question we should be asking, and it's so intertwined with the prophecy of Genesis 49. It's such a great, that's exactly what we should be asking. I love it. Okay. Then Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, you brought trouble on me by making me stink to the inhabitants of the land. The Canaanites and the Perizzites, my numbers are few, and if they gather themselves against me and attack me, I shall be destroyed, both I and my household. But they said, should they treat our sister like a prostitute? And that's the end of the story. It's an unanswered question. So who's writing this? Who's he writing it to? What's the message behind the unanswered question? Should the nations around us who are not Israelites treat the nation of Israel like a prostitute? And yet, what is the message of Hosea from God to Israel? God tells Hosea, go marry a prostitute. And then the prostitute goes after they get married and keeps doing what prostitutes do, and he has to remarry her. And it's the message is that God is continually taking back a prostitute. In Jeremiah, he draws this link between idolatry and adultery, where when they worship other gods, it's like spiritual adultery. When God finds his bride in bed with other gods, like they're prostitutes. And so this unanswered question it is a part of this story, but it's so much more a part of Israel's history. And I think to just grasp that on the smallest level with this account helps us kind of see it on a larger scale with the rest of the book of Genesis and see how they've been taken advantage of by other nations. You see Laban taking advantage of Jacob, and that's part of Israel's history. You see going down to Egypt, that's going to become a big part of Israel's history. It's just like all of Genesis becomes so intricately linked with Israel's history. And this is just the smallest little taste of it, but it's one that strikes me as so important because unanswered questions should just stick out to us. So it strikes me as the point where I can go like, oh yeah, this is setting an example for how to understand the rest of the story. Does that make sense?
I noticed something I didn't notice when I read it at home, is that it said, and they took Dinah out of Shechem's house.
Right.
So obviously he raped her, but then she didn't go back home.
Yeah, he kept her.
Husband.
Right.
So that could be also like a prostitute. Maybe she was raped
Ooh.
more than once
Okay.
because they weren't married yet.
Yeah. Certainly she was raped and kidnapped,
Yes.
right? Could that be possibly even connecting to the result of the prostitution of Israel with being taken out of the land then in that case, right? I don't know. That's a really interesting thought. I love that. You sparked something in my mind, and I want to think about it more, but we don't have time. The story of my life. Okay, 35 is where we're at. Okay, this is where the name of God is going to start getting weird. Yeah, now's the time. It wasn't before. Okay, in Hebrew has definite articles. It is the letter H and the vowel A. It's ha, and it's attached to the front of a word. So if you have the word, for example, ear, which means city, it could be translated a city because Hebrew doesn't have indefinite articles. It could be translated city or a city. But if you had the word ha'ir, it will be the city. So Hebrew has definite articles, but it just expresses an indefinite article by the absence of the definite article. Make sense? Okay. So here's why that's important. You're like, that was weird. Why'd you say that? This is why. Right here at the start of chapter 35, we have the word Elohim. And this is one of those times where I feel like it's important to say, could it be that this is Elohim talking not about Yahweh, but about some other Elohim, some other spiritual being? And here's why I say that. So Elohim says to Jacob, "Arise, go up to Bethel and dwell there, make an altar to the Elohim who appeared to you when you fled from your brother Esau." It's as if one Elohim is telling him to make an altar to another Elohim. Did you read it that way when I just read that? Did you see that? Not on your own time. I don't expect you to like catch all the weird Hebrew stuff on your own time, but when I just read that like that, and Elohim said to Jacob, and that's why I brought up the definite article, because this could be an Elohim said to Jacob, "Go to Bethel and make an altar to the Elohim who appeared to you when you fled from your brother Esau." Crazy. So Jacob said to his household and all who were with him, "Put away the foreign Elohim that are among you, and purify yourselves, and change your garments, and then arise and go up to Bethel, that I may make there an altar to the Elohim, who answers me in the day of my distress, and has been with me wherever I have gone." So they gave to Jacob all the foreign Elohim that they had, and all the rings that were in their ears. Jacob hid them under the terebinth tree that was near Shechem. And as they journeyed, a terror from Elohim fell upon the cities around them. And the cities didn't pursue Jacob, they didn't attack them, so he went to El Bethel, which is God, the house of God, or God in God's house, and built an altar there. And there Elohim revealed himself to him when he fled from his brother. And Deborah, Rebekah's nurse, died, and she was buried under an oak below Bethel. So he called its name Alon Bakuth. And then Elohim appeared to Jacob again when he came from Padan Aram and blessed him. And Elohim said to him, here's the second time his name is changed. Your name is Jacob. No longer shall you be called Jacob, but Israel shall be your name. So he called his name Israel. And Elohim said to him, I'm just going to read this in Hebrew. Ani means I, Ani, El Shaddai. This is where we get El Shaddai. You probably are familiar with that phrase. It's God Almighty. Ani El Shaddai. I am God Almighty. So how is this Elohim expressing himself differently than, for example, this Elohim? There seems to be a claim being made about this one. I am God Almighty. I am El Shaddai. El is God, Shaddai Almighty, that is connecting this Elohim to Yahweh. The God Almighty, the God of Israel, the God of gods, the Elohim of Elohim, no Elohim beside this Elohim, in the category of Elohim, but the greatest of the Elohim, God Almighty. Okay, are you tracking with me? Be fruitful and multiply. Oh, cool. Genesis 1. All right. So not only connected to Yahweh, but then inextricably linked to Genesis 1, which just has to bring us back to Yahweh being such a part of Genesis 1, and that just reminds me of the plurality and singularity of the Creator in Genesis 1 to make humanity in singularity and plural. There's just, I could just spend a whole day thinking about that, and it's awesome. A nation and a company of nations shall come from you, and kings shall come from your own body. The land that I gave to Abraham and Isaac I will give to you, and I will give the land to your offspring after you. So we went back to Genesis 1. We tied it to Yahweh through the God Almighty. We tied it to Genesis 1 through the be fruitful and multiply, and now we're tying it back to the Abrahamic covenant. So God is renewing the Abrahamic covenant with Jacob in this place. And Elohim went up from him in that place where he had spoken with him, and Jacob set up a pillar in the place where he had spoken with him, a pillar of stone. He poured out a drink offering on it and poured oil on it, and Jacob called the name of the place where Elohim had spoken with him, House of El. That's El, House of God. All right? Was that sufficiently weird? There are two hands on this side of the room. Let me go ladies first and then Mark.
I think it's interesting that we see this here after he's brought back and after he is brought out of Laban's house and away from him. Because in chapter 28, when he's making his vow at Bethel, he's talking to him like just another one of the many gods. He's not talking, like he said, because he says in verse 21. Yeah, verse 21. So that I come back to my father's house. He lays out all these conditions and says, then the Lord shall be my God. And the way he says it makes it seem like he's never encountered this God in a way where this is the God that I'm going to serve.
So when God does all these things, he's putting conditions on God.
And he's making this vow, and now God is coming back and saying, look, I fulfilled this vow. I am the God of here. That's why
Right.
God said to Jacob, arise, go to Bethel.
And now you know that,
That's where he connected this.
yeah, and now that I've done this, you know that I'm the God of Abraham and Isaac,
And now let me tell you who I am.
and I'm going to keep the covenant that I made with your granddad with you.
Exactly.
So good.
Yeah, I'll just add, she was saying 3 times in these paragraphs here at the end of this chapter, it says that he spoke with God.
Uh-huh.
That's got to be Jesus to me.
Elohim has to be Jesus to you?
Voice in the clouds. That is
Why do you think it's
incarnate
Jesus, Mark?
Jesus.
Why do you think it's Jesus and not Elohim like we were talking about before? Like, sense. Why
Jesus
you should have been
is
there?
God.
I'm sorry.
I'm just using the name of my Savior.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mine too.
Jesus explained himself to the Father. So if your point is that God the Father is this old man in heaven sitting on a cloud versus Jesus who's a man on earth, no, that's
Well, no.
Terrible children's ministry. But like,
guess I wanna
why
get
are
away
you
from
so
all
definite on Jesus as opposed to
Mm.
Elohim in the generic sense? Like we're talking about angels and things like that. Like what do
Right.
you see that you're like, Jesus?
Mm.
I look at Jesus as a living God. I don't look at God as his voice in the clouds. This is
Sure.
Jesus.
I don't think this is talking about a voice in the clouds. Yeah. I'm going to disagree with you that I think it has to be Jesus. I'm not going to say that it can't be, but I think that Moses isn't saying it's Jesus, right?
You mean when the voice in the burning bush?
Oh, Exodus 3? That one uses every name for God in Exodus 3. We'll get there, and this whole conversation is going to restart when we get there. Don't worry about that. Because Exodus 3 is like the angel of the Lord shows up, or the angel of Yahweh shows up, Yahweh speaking, not the angel, and then God speaks, and Moses answers God, but then Yahweh speaks again. It's insane. Exodus 3 takes all of, this is why we're having these discussions now, because when we get to Exodus 3, if we don't talk about this now, we will never understand Exodus 3. So, yeah. What you got?
Okay, I'm hesitant to bring this up now.
No, don't hesitate.
It's mostly logic, and I'm sure I could find a way to add references or whatever, but if man is created in the image of God, I think we've been over it, that primarily talks about God is a Trinitarian being, and man is unity and plurality,
Yes,
right? And
yeah.
so in
Singular,
man we
plural,
see
yeah.
your body, soul, and spirit, right?
Sure.
And we see God, we can probably project that can mean God is body, soul, and spirit as well. Spirit being the Holy Spirit, soul being God the Father, who does not have a body, a physical body that we ever see, which is why if you see God's face, it's such a spiritual thing. But then Jesus, we have Jesus as the incarnate being of God, and so I think. And I think I agree with Mark that every time that we see God in a bodily form, we can just kind of logically assume that is that part of the Trinity that is the physical manifestation of God. And we know later that that's Jesus when he's born and
Yeah.
has the name Jesus. But and so like we see that in the creation account too, like where the Spirit is hovering over the waters, but God the Father is the voice who speaks.
Yeah, and then the word is Jesus, like John explains. I totally am 100% on board and believe in the Trinity. But I also don't think that Moses expressed it the same way that we do, and probably didn't have the same categories for it that we do, because many of our categories where we think about the Trinity come out of the Gospels and the epistles. Grace to you and peace in the name of God the Father and our Lord Jesus Christ, and his Spirit be with you, amen, and everything else Paul writes, right? So many of our categories for the Trinity come out of the New Testament. And those are categories that people with Hebrew ways of thinking establish out of the Old Testament. And so I don't disagree with you that there is Trinitarian language present. But where I go, like, I can't just say this is the Trinity or this is Jesus, is Moses isn't saying this is the Trinity or this is Jesus. And so while I am not opposed to that argument, it's also one of those arguments that I recognize comes from the New Testament. And so for me, for our exercise here, which is very different than an exercise on a Sunday morning sermon, I want to put that in the box and read fresh Moses and say, what does Moses understand? What does Moses think? And why does he talk about God in 4 different ways in 2 verses, you know? So it's a good point. I would bring up with the God doesn't have a body thing. He is at least anthropomorphized as having a body at various times in Scripture. He's talked about as having nostrils in Exodus chapter 15, which of course is a poem. So then you have to go, is that, poetry, metaphor? Are we not supposed to take that literally? So there's anthropomorphism of God, and some would argue, and this is a debate that you can just go to seminary and have all day, and I don't know if we want to have it here, but there are people who will just die on the hill that God doesn't have a physical body, and people who will die on the hill that he does. And so I don't know if we want to go down that road totally. My time is super short. Can we just knock out this last chapter and a half and continue our discussions on email this week?
That's what I was saying.
Okay, no, I love it. I'm glad you brought it up. I mean, we do have 10 minutes, so it's not like we can say a lot in 10 minutes. Okay, so the deaths of Rachel and Isaac. Rachel, basically, she dies in childbirth with the last son, Benjamin. So Rachel is now, we're at 12, Benjamin. She names him not Benjamin, but Ben-Oni, which means son of my sorrow. And then Benjamin means, or Benjamin, son of my right hand, is what Jacob names him, which is just really interesting with the position of prominence that comes with the right hand. Jesus seated at the right hand of the Father, right? That's kind of what's being expressed here, is even before we get into the Joseph story, this name is basically Jacob saying, this is my favorite, he's going to be angry at Judah for needing to take Benjamin to Egypt. And he's going to be like, if you take Benjamin, I'm just going to die. I'm just going to go to the grave. And it's coming back to, why did he name him what he named him? It's this symbol of essentially him being the favorite. Now, that's debatable when we get into Joseph and the coat and all of that. Is Joseph the favorite? And I would say, well, both of them come from Rachel. And who was the favorite? Between Rachel and Leah, it was Rachel. And who was the first between Rachel and Leah? It was Leah. The first to have a kid and the first wife. Yeah, he doesn't marry Rachel till 7 years later. People want to talk all day about, should Jacob have married Rachel? Is it good that he did because he was tricked? Is it bad because polygamy? All these things. So, yeah. It seems like Jacob is playing favorites from before he even had a wife. Let me just say that. Sound good? Okay. If you want to talk about that more, you can email me. Honestly, you can email my wife. She is into that discussion. And she can probably talk about it better than I can. So, seriously, if you ever want to talk theology with someone who, really knows their stuff, get with Kristen. She's awesome. Okay, so Rachel dies in childbirth. He sets up a tomb and buries her. Verse 22. While Israel lived in that land, Reuben went and lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine, and Israel heard of it. And that's the end of that story. So, what do you do with that? It does come up later. It's going to come up in Genesis 49. Who is the son that Jesus will come through? Judah. Who is the son who gets a double portion of the inheritance? Joseph. Why? So if we just go like this, these ones, Zilpah and Bilhah, are not wives, they're concubines, so we're just going to take those kids out of the equation. Who's the firstborn? Reuben. And why does he not get the rights of the firstborn? He sleeps with his stepmom on his dad's couch. So we'll just cross him off. What does Simeon and Levi do? The whole Shechem thing. Let's use the covenant, the sign of the covenant, to kill a bunch of people. What does Judah do? You haven't read it yet. Genesis 38. He goes and has a kid through a prostitute who was first with his dad or something like that. I don't know. It's a nuts story.
She was the wife of his first kid.
Yeah.
He died.
Oh, yeah, the whole Onan thing.
And the next kid, he died. And then somehow she knows if she stands there dresses like a prostitute, she's just going to tell him.
Yeah. And yeah, so obviously he had a reputation for picking up ladies of the night. Yeah, because he didn't have enough kids. Yeah, it's a crazy story. And there's a really cool thing at the end of that story. We're going to talk about this next week, but I'm just going to kind of give you a little intro to it right now. We're going to see in Judah repentance that we don't see in Reuben, Simeon, and Levi. And what you see in Joseph is the firstborn, but not of the first wife, but of the second wife. And so there is almost like a splitting of the firstborn privilege and responsibility in the family of Jacob, where the right to rule the family, the scepter will not depart from Shiloh until something or other. That's Genesis 49. We'll talk about that next week. But Judah gets the ruling privilege, while Joseph ends up with the double portion. And it's this really interesting split of the firstborn rights of a family. Yeah. Sorry? What do you mean? From Esau. So the firstborn hasn't had the birthright. Well, didn't Isaac do the same thing to Ishmael? Right? Isaac does it to Ishmael, Jacob does it to Esau. The firstborn, the first three born from Leah lose the birthright because of that sin, and then Judah does basically the same thing in some kind of sexual sin, but then repents of it. And you see Jesus coming through Judah. And just by point of application, I would just kind of summarize that by saying the way to Jesus is through repentance, right? So just bring out that point of application from there. Chapter 36 is the descendants of Esau, and just the one interesting thing from here that I want to point out before we finish up is who does Esau get with that the idea of Israel is the purity of the line, right? You got to go back to the family. You got to not marry Canaanites and things like that. But Esau, he's going to the Canaanites. He's marrying Hittites and Hivites and Ishmaelites. So we saw the mixing of Ishmael with the nation of Edom, and now we see the mixing of the Hittites and the Hivites, both of which are nations from Deuteronomy chapter 7, which will be listed among the 7 nations that Israel is supposed to wipe out in their conquest of the Promised Land. So there's all of this genetic mixing of these nations outside of Israel, and that's kind of what I get when I read this genealogy of Esau. And then last point, these are the generations of, what's our Hebrew word? Toledot. There you go. And then it is kind of stepping back from the biblical story to tell us those are the generations. And then when we get down to chapter 37, which we'll start with next week, it says in verse 2, these are the generations of Jacob. So all of chapter 37 is, you remember when we stopped the story and looked at these are the generations of Ishmael, and we just looked at that one family outside of Israel? Chapter 36 is doing exactly the same thing on a little bit larger scale because Edom is a little bit bigger player in the Old Testament, where Ishmael kind of is not going to be a big part of the Old Testament for very long. Make sense? That chapter 37, these are the generations of, if I'm not mistaken, I think that is the last Toledot in the book of Genesis. And so we're entering into from 37 to 50, and the story of Joseph and his brothers. This is like the last portion. It's why we're reading it all in 1 week together, because this is like the last chunk of the book, and it's all one big story, the generations of Jacob. Sound good? Did I leave you with more questions than I answered? Okay. I love that. Clay, you want to pray for us tonight?